What's a subtle sign that someone is a good person but doesn't want to show it? Probably a boring answer, but I have this friend who I can just tell is really sincere when he asks how I am doing. I appreciate anyone asking because it's a convenient conversation starter, but with him, I can tell he actually cares what the answer is. I have been trying for the last few years to stop, take a breath, and be ready to listen to the reply when I ask how are you to anybody, including the coffee guy I will probably never met again. Just a genuine I see you human and hope you are okay question. It is amazing how much people open up and make connections when you yourself are ready to. On the other end of it, as the coffee guy I would almost always ask how somebody was doing. The times people gave me a real answer and not just a good "you" made the day so much better. Regardless of how bad the news event was, it at least would be a real human interaction. As a retail employee who can't give more than a good "you," I dislike the question. I wish people would give more than that copy and paste answer. I vividly remember once when a customer stated the normal good and then immediately said actually that's bullshit, today sucks, and then apologized for cussing. It was amazing. Discretion. I see it as a sign of empathy most of times. At least, they anticipate that openness may be undesirable for you, and so they remain discreet in order to make you more comfortable. Be it regarding some information you've shared with them, or when helping you out with something no questions asked. I've found that saying I don't need to know more if you're not comfortable telling me is one of the surest ways to get someone to unload all of it on me. I've completely meant it every time I've said it, and also have learned to expect this reaction. I have found this to be true also. I think when you say something like that to someone who's upset, it takes the pressure off them a little bit. They can breathe for a minute, and they always launch into it. I think being told hey you can talk or not, but I'm here for you shows a person you're going to be a good impartial listener. Obligation is the death of a lot of things. Had a teacher growing up that came across as very strict and standoffish. Gave off this air of learn the material or fail. In reality though, he would answer any questions you had, even if it was being repeated, was incredibly patient, and would stay as late as he needed to in order to make sure the students understood the material. If a majority of the class bombed a test, he would address it with the class to understand what went wrong, and would redo the material if needed. Looking at him, or just popping by his class, you'd think he'd be a typical hard ass. But in reality he cared immensely about making sure we understood our lessons and were prepared for the next year. My app calc teacher in high school was pretty similar to this. While he doesn't necessarily look intimidating, he walks around with a cup that says student tears and will not hesitate to say things like hey student. Maybe if you actually paid attention in class you wouldn't get 70s on all your tests. When a kid was talking during his teaching, he would make fun of all of us for the dumb things we did. But he knew what all of our boundaries were. He would only say something like that to certain kids he knew could handle it. He was also the best dang teacher I ever had a 99% pass rating on the app calc because exam over his 10 plus years of teaching it. He would be there before and after school and also during lunch for help or just to let you chill in his room. They are the best teachers. He also collects ties and coffee mugs that his students bring back from their colleges and very proudly uses them. Even though he told all of us, don't bother giving me a grad party invite because I will not go lol. When you're in a group and that one person keeps trying to say something or add to the conversation but they keep getting talked over, then that other person will look at them and say, sorry person, I didn't catch what you were trying to say, can you repeat it? And make space for the person being ignored unintentionally. That's a real gem. I feel validated by this. Admonishes people for being rude to wait staff. I was at a family dinner at a pub restaurant years ago, and my sister was very rude to the waiter because her steak was overcooked or something. Really went hard on him. And my brother's new girlfriend, who always seemed a shy and quiet person, told my sister to basically stop being a bitch and that the waiters didn't cook the food and you're embarrassing all of us. Everyone's looking at us, etc. From that point on, I knew she was a good sort. Did the relationship last? She left him for the waiter. When folks are piling on jokes on teases on someone that they don't know very well, and the person quietly raises a point of kindness or empathy, it's so easy to be mean-spirited, especially in group settings. It's harder to be kind in those situations. They are given a chance to quietly talk bad about someone, but instead says something good. I'll never tell this her face, but she's a wonderful person and a gifted artist. Helping others for the sake of helping them without expecting anything in return. When you are having an argument and they actually listen to your point instead of just getting ready to make this. Or when they don't insult you as a person as a comeback to your argument. I despise that this has become so normalized, especially in politics or anybody with an audience. Guy I used to work with was such a class clown. Always cracking jokes. Everybody liked him because he was so funny. It was a while before I realized that his jokes were never at anybody's expense. He was kind. There was never anything mean in anything he ever said to anybody's face or behind their back. Anyway, we are married now. Well, that was a nice twist. True merit is like a river. The deeper it is, the less noise it makes. Edward F. Elwood. They say take your time. I always thought of it as a common courtesy. Even if I'm not in a hurry, like if I'm waiting for a Starbucks order and I have nowhere to really be. When someone says it'll be out in a few minutes, I just say don't worry, take your time, because I always felt it was the polite thing to say. What most people don't realize is that bit of common courtesy shows that you recognize the other person as a human being whose time and emotions also have value. Many people are so lacking in self-awareness and empathy that they simply do not value other people's time. Thanks for taking the time to care. I really appreciate you. Edit to add to this. We all have our blind spots and we all have our off days. You are not automatically a monster if you forget to be polite one time. The good news is we can learn our blind spots and grow our whole lives if we just tell ourselves to take our time once in a while. I get a lot of when you have a moment when I'm working behind the bar. It shows people see I'm busy and they're not trying to rush me, but that's when I put them first. My mom used this trick on me as a kid. She would say, when you have a chance, can you do the dishes, sweep the floor, load the laundry, and lo and behold, I would actually do it right then and there, being as stubborn as I was. I waited tables at a pretty popular New Mexican restaurant when I was in college. There was this one manager. Her name was Rosie, and she never smiled. She always looked like she was pissed off at everyone and everything. The entire waitstaff and bus staff feared her. When she walked into the kitchen and wanted something, the line would immediately jump to her demands. It was rumored that she was the person to fire any employee when an employee was fired. The only people that didn't seem to be scared of her were the hostesses. They were always talking to her like she was just any other manager or person in the restaurant. She scared the heck out of me for the first year I worked there. I made sure that she never had anything to be upset at with me. One day, I came into work sick as duck and having just a really bad day. She took me to the side and talked to me for a good half hour, just asking questions about my day and how school was going. Towards the end of the conversation, she said I didn't look good and that if I wanted to, I could take the night off. Rosie was the best ducking person I ever met inside the restaurant industry. From that day on, it was my goal to make her laugh. I never did make her laugh, but I got a smile out of her quite a bit after that. She was not just a good person, she was one of the best. But man, you wouldn't know it unless you really took the time to look. She was one of those types of people you know had a hard time in life and put up a rough exterior, but deep down she was a softie and loving grandmother type. I hope she's happy in her retirement. Cool story to hear. Thanks for sharing. I hope she is happy too. This gives me hope with my manager. She is really rude when I ask for help, but she did let me go home the time the stress made me physically sick. When someone is actually in trouble, needs help, they will help out, even if it's really subtle or disguised as something else. For instance, there was a kid in my school who had a reputation for not caring about others, doing whatever he wanted, and tried to convince everyone that he pretty much had no emotions. I think he thought it made him seem more tough and hardcore. And although he didn't necessarily do anything bad to anyone, he tried not to seem kind either. Once, one of my friends at school had some sort of emergency where she needed I think 30. Most people in class either didn't have 30, which was quite a bit for a kid to bring to school to loan her, or they just didn't want to give it to her, thinking they would never get it back, and she was panicking. The teachers couldn't help her for some sort of legal reason. I think she wanted to take a taxi to the hospital because something had happened to a family member but was slightly underage, and the teachers had to pretend that they had no idea she was doing this. So, this kid with the reputation collected money from all of his friends since he didn't have the money himself, under the pretense of another reason. I think it was something like movie tickets or something for that evening. Then, he privately gave it to her, but told her not to tell anyone it was him. I was close friends with her and was actually standing right next to her when he approached us and told us this. She managed to get to the hospital on time while he paid for the tickets or whatever with his own money once he got home. When she later offered to pay him back, he refused, insisting that he didn't do anything. I think he knew that her family would struggle to pay that back. They were having some financial trouble. I guess it's not extremely subtle in my case, since I was standing right there, but that was the first time I began realizing how some people pretended to not be a good person when they actually were. Wow, this is really eerie, because this story is actually almost spot on for something I witnessed in high school. Girl had a family emergency and needed to buy a bus ticket to travel 2 hours to where the hospital was, and didn't have the money. A friend of mine, who was a notorious apathetic person, came to me and was like, I need to borrow 10, and when I pressed why, he said he was giving it to this girl so she could afford bus fare. I have no idea what a ticket cost then, but he apparently borrowed enough from his friends because she made it, and he denied ever doing anything and claimed he used the money to buy weed. After we graduated, this friend moved out of his mom's house, lived for 2 years on his own, and then attempted suicide. I hadn't really kept in touch, but I found out through another friend that his mom had been pretty abusive, and to top it off, had taken credit cards out in his name, putting him in massive debt at the age of 20. This was after years of emotional and physical abuse. He's doing great now, married to a great woman, and we casually keep in touch through Facebook and email. Over the decade and a half since his attempted suicide, more and more information has been shared about just what he was going through in high school. I really feel like his little act of kindness in helping that girl was in a way therapeutic for him. A person who needed help and wasn't getting it, to help someone else. The person who asks, "How are you?" and genuinely wants to know, giving responses that show understanding. I've discovered that often what appears to be indifference is actually an internal struggle of, I'm extremely concerned about this, but I don't think that it's any of my ducking business or requires my intervention. Whoa, you just put into words what I haven't been able to for most of my life. Same. I'd be there for anyone who needed me in a heartbeat if I knew they wanted my help. But I'm learning about myself that my parents were wild off and emotionally preoccupied growing up. So I internalize the message that loving others means giving them space and not inflicting myself on them. When I sense people are overwhelmed, I become very worried that having to respond to a text or a phone call from me will be what pushes them over the edge. It seems like a silly thing to worry about, but I've seen so many people tweeting and posting about being overwhelmed by electronic communications since the pandemic began that it's reinforcing my communication anxiety. People who make excuses to do good deeds. Picking you up from the airport. Oh, it was on my way. Buying you a beer. I accidentally ordered 2. Helping you move. I need the workout. Now I don't have to go to the gym later. Volunteering at an event. I had nothing else going on tonight. I'm just here cause my buddy asked me to. Anyone who does a favor for you and then acts like you're doing them a favor, or brushes the favor off as nothing, is a person who is doing the good deed for the sake of it and not for the praise or clout they receive. These are the best kinds of people. I was at school with a guy who was the king of the cool kids. He was always getting busted for breaking school rules, drinking, smoking, kept bad-mouthing the teachers and so on. In fact, he did a bit of jail time later for non-violent low-level drug dealing. I was the uber geek of the school. I didn't get bullied as such. But I remember one time that his cool gang kids were ribbing me a bit too much, and he stepped in and told them to cool it. And a bit later, when I won the school academic prize, he went out of his way to sincerely congratulate me. In fact, a few years later, and after the jail time, he became pretty well known as a TV personality and had his own show, where he was generally lauded as giving the impression of being a really nice guy, which, in this case, he was. Someone who's always quiet, but raises their concern when they feel it's against his or someone's will. People who ignore things like accidentally spitting while talking, or accidentally farting, to not make you feel embarrassed.